Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy is the equally leggy blonde Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. And, John, you have to turn on your mic so the good people can hear you.
Hello, Dan.
There you
How
go.
are you?
Yeah, well, boy, that's a little Melania.
Is it kind of like I was going for Kathleen Turner, but yeah. But, you know.
A voice so husky it could pull a dog sled.
Before, I'm saying, body heat Kathleen Turner.
Yeah, no.
Not
before Kathleen Turner ate Kathleen Turner. Yes. Now, I know what you're saying. So we need to continue our discussion of the state budget because you need to hear more from some of these noblemen and magistrates in Springfield that you vote for and then many of you pay no attention to until, the system completely seizes up or the Ponzi schemes start throwing off some real losses that you start to feel. We didn't know.
When it falls apart, it's like, but no one told us.
Now, before I talk about the surrender Republicans again, and you hear from them and how morally indignant they are about, lying to you, just say this. I watched most of the floor debate on Sunday night on this in the House, and you're going to hear from the bad actors. You're going to hear from those who are enthusiastic about surrendering to Mike Madigan, about running the same scam on you that's been run for the last 40 years, which is why we have the worst governed state in the history of America. But there were great speeches, impassioned speeches, fact-intensive speeches on the House floor from many Republican reps, too. Jeannie Ives and Mark Batnick and Alan Skillicorn and Tom Morrison and Peter Breen come to mind. I'm sure I'm missing some others. So it was 15 Republicans that voted for this. It was 36 who did not. So it's not all one, but having, a third of rough numbers, a third of your caucus vote for this, you got a real internal problem you got to solve. And maybe Governor Ronner is more sensitive to that reality than he was prior to this. Here's David Harris from Arlington Heights, who's been there 2 decades, but he doesn't want to preside over the financial destruction of Illinois.
Let me tell you something very clearly. I was not elected as a state legislator to help preside over the financial destruction of this great state. I respect my colleagues who are voting no, but to me, enough is enough.
Well, here's the thing.
Kick that can.
Republican David Harris. Here's the thing. By the way, the applause was from Democrats. Republican David Harris from Arlington Heights. He can yell as much as he wants because that's what he does. That's his, kind of high hat. That's his version of it. I don't respect you, and no one should. And the people in northwest suburban Cook County who elected you should be ashamed of themselves. I hope you're waking up to the reality of this individual being a longtime enemy inside the perimeter who needs to go. And he's up for another job, so I hope he gets it. He's up for another sinecure so that he can, lard on.
How many pensions? Then?
Yeah, right. So he can lard on to what he's already going to get out of your pocket. That's the problem with the Republican Party. In just one example, there are many, but he's a great encapsulation of the surrender Republican mentality and being rather dismissive of you in the process. Now, on the flip side, you are not going to hear from a more smarmy, oleaginous politician in your life than Lou Lang, who's been there 30 years. And he doesn't want to preside over the destruction of Illinois either. And who do you represent? Here's the only guy who can outfoe morally can heap more moral scorn on you while raising your taxes than David Harris, Lou Lang.
And you have to ask yourself, who are you here representing?
Jimmy DeLeo, right, Lou?
Are you here representing your political party?
Casino interests.
Right.
Your governor? Your campaign donors? Your friends? Your leaders? Facebook think tanks that don't do much thinking? Or do you represent everyone in the state of Illinois?
Yeah, Illinois Policy Institute shot.
Our titles are state representatives. I heard a bunch of people talk about their constituents. Your responsibilities go way beyond your own constituents. For I represent the constituents of the lady from Wheaton, and she represents mine.
Let me tell you, Lou Lang from Skokie, you come over to Wheaton, my hometown, try and represent our interests, I'll bury you in Northside Park.
In that nice Lexus that he rents.
For more on this, more on this topic and what's to come next, as the Senate has already overridden the governor's veto and the House is poised to do it, or are they? Will Madigan call the override vote? Because there's two political schools of thought, and remember, this is all politics because the Illinois Royals treat your lives and livelihoods as a game. You're a game to them. And if you don't understand that, then you're not paying attention. But for more on this topic and what's happening on the ground in Springfield, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Chris Kaergard, who is a political reporter for the Journal-Star in Peoria. And once upon a time, he was growing a beard until Illinois passed a constitutionally balanced budget. He gave that up because he was starting to shame ZZ Top with how long his beard had become. Chris, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Happy to be there, Dan.
So does Madigan call the override vote today or tomorrow to confirm this tax hike and override the governor's veto?
What we're hearing now is that it's going to be tomorrow. The question in a lot of people's minds is what kind of game is he playing, delaying it until Thursday after telling everyone and letting everyone believe that there's a huge sense of urgency in getting it done by the time the bond markets open today and by the time the bond rating agencies today have the ability to downgrade Illinois to what would be a well-deserved junk status. What kind of game is he playing waiting until Thursday? Has he so lost control of his own membership that he can't get enough people down there on a holiday when they were already supposed to be in session, let alone the day after a holiday today for an override vote? There has to be more to it than that.
So it's possible that he wants the downgrade to just put that much more pressure and to make the override that much easier.
It's possible he wants it for that. It's also possible he wants it so that he can still try to pin on the governor that governor junk label, especially given that what Governor Rauner gets out of this entire affair is he gets some pressure taken off with the outward appearance of the problem taken away, at least for the foreseeable future. But by vetoing the tax increase, he still gets to run against the tax increase. He still gets to call it the Mike Madigan tax increase, never mind that he managed to lose, and make no mistake, he lost them a third of the Republican caucus in the House.
Yeah.
What's the fallout for those 15 Republicans who basically gave cover for the 8
And don't forget about Mr. 16, Dale Ryder in the Senate.
Yeah. What's the fallout for that?
I think a lot of that depends on a case-by-case basis. We have folks like Mike Eunice down in the Peoria area here who represent what's fundamentally a Republican district. A Democratic district down in Fulton County. A lot of public aid down there. A lot of need for social services.
Is that where Mother Teresa is?
Yeah. He invoked Mother Teresa in his impassioned floor speech. Boy, he breathes some rarefied air, does Mike Eunice.
They all certainly do when they're coming down to a vote like this. He also sits on $500,000 worth of campaign funds already. So if there's going to be a primary challenge to him, it's going to have to be a very well-funded one. Interestingly, the only person who's running against him so far, he's getting a challenge from the left. He's got a Democrat who's announcing tomorrow she's running against him. Apparently, he's not liberal enough.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of decisions to be made in the coming months, as you know, Chris, about who is and is not going to get primaried. And this may beat some people out of the brushes that otherwise wouldn't have considered running for legislative office, but may now in particular districts once they're informed about just exactly what their legislators are doing. And as you know, I'm in my private life as private citizen, Dan Proft, I'm very interested in this as well.
Right, and the one thing any of those folks is going to have to answer is, all right, how do you handle getting the money otherwise. Nobody, well, I won't say nobody because there was some cheering on the Democratic side for raising the taxes, and a lot of people have wanted it for years, but few people really look and say, oh, good, a tax increase, that feels great. What anybody running a primary has to answer is, all right, what else are you going to cut to get that $5 billion, 4.5 from the individual income tax, and another $500 million from the corporate income tax? What other cuts are you going to make to get there?
Now, just going back to Madigan and his calculation, since this is the great intrigue, is there any thought that he may not call the override veto? He may use, especially if for whatever reason you have some of those Republicans who voted for it peel off under pressure, that he may say, look, I passed a bipartisan budget, and the governor vetoed it. So if he doesn't like mine, then he can come up with his own, and, oh, by the way, you got a month till school start.
It's possible he does that, but that raises the stakes to a whole new level, and I'm also not convinced that you get Republicans peeling off at this point. Those 15 are already likely to be viewed as traitors by a number of people in the Republican Party.
Right.
Do they really want to offend people on the left or in the center who are low-information voters by also getting the flip-flopper label on top of that, or a re-flip-flopper label?
Now, one other aspect, that's a fair point. Now, one other aspect of this that has been underreported because, everybody focuses on the political gamesmanship between the principals is school funding as a part of this, and how the Madigan, the House Democrats, tied in Senate Bill 1, which is, this is my description, a huge transfer of school funding away from suburban school districts to bail out Chicago and also to sprinkle the infield downstate. So this veto override would include that school funding component, right? Right.
They did this is the challenge of Mike Madigan is the way he plays three-dimensional chess on issues like this. He included in there essentially a requirement that Senate Bill 1 be signed in order for any education funding to go into effect. Now, you've also got the challenge for Bruce Rauner that he went ahead and let it be known that 90% of Senate Bill 1 he could live with, and a lot of people look at that and say, well, why can't you take the victory on the 90% and deal with the rest?
All right, he is Chris Kaergard, political reporter for the Peoria State Journal, for the Peoria Journal-Star, and former budget beard guy. What other signs of protest or encouragement are you going to come up with respect to your physical appearance to try and improve the state?
Oh, that last carnival act was plenty for me this time.
Okay, all right. Thanks for joining us, Chris. Appreciate it.
See you, Chris.
Thanks, Tim.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know.